This is Bailey Rice. He's 16 years old and plays for Rangers as a central midfielder. At the start of Football Manager 2024, he is a member of Rangers under-18s team. He is a player that Rangers believe could have massive potential to become a star. One of the key areas of development in youth football centres around training. At a young age, players are likely to develop quickly under the right circumstances. One question that is always asked when it comes to youth development is, should I use double intensity training to get the most out of my young player quickly? Well, in this video, that is exactly what I am going to be looking at. You're going to see the same player trained in two different ways to see if there is any benefit to putting players aged 16 to 19 through double intensity training, or whether it is best to just leave them to develop with normal training. For this video, I will not be promoting Rice to the first team. For fairness and to show how the training alone helps or hinders him, he will stay with the under-18s for 2 seasons before spending the last season as part of the B team. Just for transparency, all of the first screenshots you will see will be the normal training, and all of the second screenshots are the double intensity training. In Season 1, the normally trained version of Rice would show some pleasing signs of development. Looking at his player profile page, you can see he has had progress in a number of areas. He has 3 yellow arrows in the physicals, 6 in the mentals, and a single yellow in the technicals. He would have 1 orange arrow, that being for corners. This version of the player would play in 40 non-competitive matches and make 1 appearance as a substitute for Scotland under-21s. Looking at his progress graph shows he has actually had a lot of regression in his technical attributes, leading to a slight overall drop in the technicals. He would have no significant change in the mentals, and a slight overall improvement in the physicals. His biggest gain would be 1 point in composure and stamina, and his biggest loss would be 2 points for corners. In the double intensity version of Rice, we could see that he actually doesn't seem to have had too much progression in his development. Looking at his player profile shows that he has had progress in marking, concentration and work rate, but overall there are a total of 16 orange arrows in all 3 areas of his game. This version of Rice would play 47 non-competitive games. Looking at his progress chart shows pretty much the same thing as the normally trained player. He's had a slight overall drop in terms of the technical side of his game, no significant changes in the mental part of his game, and a slight overall improvement in the physicals. He wouldn't have any points gained, but he did have some losses with 2 points in corners and free kicks. In Season 2, the normally trained version of Rice's profile page shows a mixed bag in terms of development. He would have positive signs for natural fitness, stamina, work rate, technique, heading and dribbling. He would, however, also have a total of 11 orange arrows. In Season 2, he would play in 49 non-competitive games and have 3 starts at the Under-20s World Cup. Looking at his development graph shows he now has had a major overall drop in his technical abilities. He has had no significant change to his mentals and has now had a major improvement in the physicals. His biggest gain would be 2 points in stamina and the biggest loss 4 points for corners. On the double intensity version of the player's profile page, we can see that he has had a more settled season in terms of his progression. He has made progress in his strength, stamina, pace, agility and composure. The only orange arrow is for free kick taking. This version of the player would make 44 non-competitive appearances and was also selected to start in 2 Under-20s World Cup games. Looking at his progression chart once again is similar to the normally trained version. He would have a slight drop in the technicals, no significant change in the mentals, and only a slight overall improvement in the physicals. This version's biggest gain would be 2 points in strength, and his biggest loss would be 3 points in corners and free kick taking. Moving on to the final season, and the normally trained version of the player is showing some stability in his progression attribute wise. For the first time there are no yellow arrows, but there are 2 orange ones. These represent a slight drop in corners and free kick taking, which seems to be a bit of a theme with this player. This version of the player would only play in 4 non-competitive starts after being promoted to the B team due to his age. He would also make 2 substitute appearances for the first team and 2 substitute appearances for the Scotland under-21s. Looking at his final development graph, you can see he has had a major overall drop in the technical abilities, a slight overall improvement in his mental abilities, and a major overall improvement in his physicals. His biggest gain would be in stamina, and his biggest losses, as usual, were in the corners and free kick taking. The normally trained player would only miss 45 days due to 6 different injury spells across the 3 seasons. Looking at the player profile page of the double intensity version of the player shows that he has had no progression or regression across the final season in terms of progress arrows. This version of the player wouldn't make any appearances after being promoted to the B team, but would make 2 starts for Scotland under-21s. Looking at the progression chart for this version of the player once again shows he is very similar to the normally trained player. He shows a major overall drop in the technicals, a slight overall improvement in the mentals, and a major overall improvement in his physical abilities. His biggest gain would be in strength, and his biggest losses would be free kick taking and corners, exactly the same as the other version. Looking at the double intensity version of the player's injury record though, shows the true effects of the training. He would go on to miss 99 days due to 10 periods of injury through 3 seasons. So if we look at both versions of the player side by side, you can see that it is close, but one of the two is clearly ahead in his development. The player who received the normal workload of training is ahead when you look at the attributes. In all 3 areas of their game, he has advantages. The double intensity trained player missed double the amount of days due to injury, which could explain some of the reason why he is behind. Overall, I don't think there are any benefits to sustained periods of double intensity training in players aged 16 to 19.